Constantine is remembered as an emperor. But the more interesting story begins before the crowns and statues. He was a man trying to hold a fractured world together while every border, army, and belief system pulled in a different direction. The late Roman Empire was not one stable machine. It was a pressure system. Frontiers were under strain. Generals were ambitious, cities were changing. And the old certainty of Rome was already starting to crack. Constantine's world was also a world of symbols. Coins, standards, statues, and public rituals mattered. Because people believed power had to be seen to be real. Before the famous victory, there was a civil war. Rivals fought for legitimacy. And the Roman state became a contest over who could claim destiny. Not just territory. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge became the moment history remembered. Because memory loves turning points. But the real story is not magic alone. It is politics, fear, and the pressure of survival. Later tradition attached a vision to that battle. A sign in the sky that turned victory into destiny. Whether one reads it as faith, propaganda, or personal experience, the symbol mattered because it changed the shape of the story. Symbols do not work by themselves. They work because people are ready for them. In a chaotic empire, a new emblem could become a bridge between military success and spiritual legitimacy. After the battle, Constantine did not simply inherit Rome. He had to reorganize it. That meant court politics, military loyalty, new alliances, and a very deliberate rewriting of what authority looked like. He also understood that cities speak. When he began reshaping the imperial center, architecture became a political language. Buildings could announce a new era long before a speech could. That is why Constantinople mattered. A city can be a statement. A new capital meant a new map of power. And a new map of power meant the old center was no longer the only center. The eastern half of the empire offered trade, routes, and strategic depth. By moving attention east, Constantine was not just changing geography. He was changing the empire's future balance. Religion was becoming impossible to ignore. Christianity was growing, but the empire was still religiously mixed. And every ruler had to decide whether belief was a threat, a tool, or both. Constantine's policies did not create a simple peace. They created a new balance. Favoring one faith while managing many others was not a clean solution. It was a political gamble. The Council of Nicaea is remembered for doctrine. But it was also about order. Empires use councils when they want arguments to stop looking like private disagreements and start looking like public structure. That is the deeper Constantine pattern. He did not just win battles. He built systems that could outlast battle smoke. His legacy is as much institutional as it is personal. Even his image became part of the state. Sculptures, busts, coins, and inscriptions were all doing the same work. Making the ruler feel inevitable. But inevitability is dangerous. Because it hides choices. Constantine's reign was filled with calculated moves. And each move carried consequences for rivals, provinces, and believers. The armies mattered too. Emperors survive when soldiers believe in them. And soldiers believe in leaders who can win, pay, reward, and remember who kept them alive. Victory made Constantine visible. Administration made him durable. And durability is what turns a contender into a founder of an era. That new era was not clean or gentle. It still contained violence, exclusion, and ambition. But it also created the framework from which later medieval politics would emerge. When people look back and ask what Constantine really changed, the answer is not only religion or not only politics. He changed the relationship between the two. That shift mattered for centuries. Once rulers and belief systems were braided together more tightly. Europe and the Mediterranean would never quite return to the older Roman arrangement. There is also a human side to Constantine that gets hidden by the legend. He was a son, a rival, a commander, and a political operator working inside a volatile family and an unstable empire. Every empire tells stories about itself after the fact. Constantine's story was polished by later believers, later critics, and later historians who all needed him to mean something different. That is why the legend feels larger than the man. He became a symbol onto which later generations projected triumph, conversion, order, and authority. The most interesting historical figures are rarely simple heroes or villains. They are crossroads. Constantine was a crossroads between pagan Rome and Christian empire, between civil war and institutional change. And once you see him that way, the story stops being only about one emperor. It becomes about the making of a world. That world would shape law, art, church authority, statecraft, and identity long after Constantine was gone. That is what makes his story worth returning to again and again. In the final analysis, Constantine was not just a convert, a conqueror, or a founder. He was all three. And the tension between those roles is exactly what makes him endure in memory. The question is not whether he was perfect. The question is how one ruler managed to redirect history by understanding that armies, cities, and symbols can all be moved together. And that is the hidden power of Constantine. Not just that he ruled, but that he helped decide what ruling would mean for centuries after him. If you want the full story of the man behind the legend, stay with us. The details behind Constantine are where the real history begins. He changed what people saw in their hands, where imperial images, victory language, and sacred symbols travel together through daily exchange. Another clue is administrative. Imperial letters, legal favors, and church privileges show a ruler using paperwork as power. The conversion story matters, but the machinery of government made that story durable. The bishops were not background characters either. Councils and disputes reveal Constantine as a manager of unity, trying to turn a divided religious movement into something the empire could recognize. Host, and sometimes pressure. Constantinople was also an argument in stone. Its location connected Europe and Asia. Sea lanes and land routes, military defense and imperial ceremony. A new capital made geography part of the message. The popular version often asks whether Constantine was sincere. The better question is harder. How did personal belief, battlefield survival, dynastic ambition, and imperial administration become almost impossible to separate? That is why Constantine still unsettles historians. He did not simply leave an answer. He left a system of images, laws, places, and memories that kept arguing long after the man himself was gone. If you want the full story of the man behind the legend, stay with us. The details behind Constantine are where the real history begins.